Welcome to Off 63rd with Garrard McClendon. For tonight's show, we have a treat, a look at what happens after the show when the conversation not only keeps going, but also gets raw and gritty. We're talking about self-love, why R. Kelly didn't go to jail after that sex tape trial, and how Bill Cosby may need to be a little bit more like Rahm Emanuel. Joining me in the forum is the teacher, the attorney, and the Republican. This is Off 63rd, Chicago, from the beach to the burbs. Welcome to Off 63rd, Chicago, from the beach to the burbs after the show. This is raw. This is uncut. I can say whatever I want to say, and so can these guests. We're going to continue the discussion. I've got Lenny McCallister. I've got Sam Adam Jr. I also have Stacy Davis-Gates in the mix, and she's smiling.
No one says it like that.
I love it. I love it. I love it. You know, we finished the show tonight talking about Uncle Bill Cosby and Uncle Rush, also known as Russell Simmons. Do you think this was publicity driven? Was this a serious measure from Bill Cosby?
Yes.
What do you think, Lenny?
Yes, it was a serious measure. Listen, and I don't disagree with this, and I've actually tried to up my game a little bit on VON. When are we going to be so angry that we're going to show our anger, and that anger is going to prompt some action to change what we see? Case in point, I've thrown it out there on the Chicago Defender. I've thrown it out on WVON. You know, is the incident in Cleveland, Texas, our Emmett Till moment? Is this the incident that we look at that is so ugly that we stare at it and you say, you know what, you deal with this, like Mamie Till made us deal with all those years ago. You deal with this, and then you change it. Now, if that means that Bill Cosby, Mr. Jello Pudding Pops, has to drop an F-bomb like Rahm Emanuel in order to get our attention, so be it. I'd rather have that than hear about another 200, 300 people being shot in Chicago over the next 12 months.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because when Darion Albert was killed, Finger High School, the videotape is horrifying. I still didn't see the outrage that really should have occurred when it comes to standing up for the Darion Albert family and standing up for that crisis. It seems that in this country, and I'm kind of glad Bill Cosby did this, it does wake us up, but it seems like when something's perpetrated against us from a so-called outsider, we get outraged, but when we do it to each other, oh man, it's okay, you still my brother. Hold up, Lenny, let me go to Sam Adam Jr. Sam, you look pensive, talk to me.
Again, this is going back to the Jalen Rose, and I think we are missing this as a community. It's how we see ourselves. We are not worthy. That when a Darion Albert happens, that's just another from the street. As opposed to when somebody white comes, then we galvanize. Then we have an opportunity to get together and say, they can't do that to us. But we look at ourselves with such degradation. We look at ourselves and really without the love of self that we need. People need to stop, think to themselves and say, enough is enough. Yeah, I do criminal defense, but that's only to protect the Constitution so the innocent people won't be caught up in this. We have, as a community, to say, okay, we need to look, listen, and understand. We are as deserving as anyone else, and stop letting ourselves be put down and put ourselves first.
Stacy, history teacher, I'm listening to these two gentlemen here, but is there a historical context to that self-hatred?
Absolutely. And what I think is even more profound, I'm going to take it just slightly in another direction, is that when we see historical movements, mass movements like we spoke about in the Middle East, we see the youth at the center of this movement. What we have in our community today, particularly in our African American community, is that they are disempowered by choice. Our parents have not made us better than they are. And that's the hope of every generation, is that every generation is better. But it goes back to the self-loathing. If I'm not worthy, then it doesn't happen. But you also can't front on all of the circumstances that are surrounding the people who you want to be the most empowered, right? Change comes from a core group of middle-class individuals who have a close tie to the disempowered. The disempowered very rarely embark on that movement because they're so busy with survival.
I disagree with that.
Wait.
I disagree
I
with
don't
that.
know, Lenny, because I'm gonna let you, Lenny, I'm gonna let you speak because
Okay.
she does have an interesting point. Isn't it the responsibility of McCallister, Adam, Davis-Gates, and McClendon, who are in somewhat of a privileged position, to help those who may not have a voice?
100%. But the disadvantaged always rose up in the African American community. Jim Crow, people from Mississippi that had to run the risk of getting castrated or hung, lynched, shot, killed every single day of their lives, those people rose up. People that were slaves rose up. People that had to go through the aftermath of Reconstruction rose up. We always rose up. We always educated ourselves with absolutely nothing. Slaves risked dying in order to learn how to read. So to use 150, 200, 300, 400 years of people rising up from the worst of conditions and see what we're looking through now and then make excuses it's unimaginable.
Look up,
Listen,
oh man, it's the year 2011,
But
and
think
we
about
got
this,
Booker T versus WEB. I'm gonna take your rebuttal, then I'm going to phone.
He's right to an extent. They did, but they were shepherded by a leader. There was always a leader there, and that leader more than likely was either the one who was in the house because he was able to learn how to read because he was privy to books in the house, and then he or she gave that to the field. You have a king who was a Morehouse graduate, solidly middle class, who gave that, who inspired that in the South. So
Malcolm
every
X?
time, Malcolm X
Was a criminal.
It's quite, but you can't front on the fact that his father was a follower of Garvey. His foundation prior to the death of his father was solidly in self-empowerment.
Thank God for the
Solidly
nation.
in black-
Thank God
in
for the
black
nation of
nationalism.
Islam.
Chicago, though.
Well,
But where did the real change come from? I mean, think about where the real change come from. Yes, everyone that you have mentioned
Galvanization.
Here,
It came from
that's true, but
galvanization
who-
of
but
all
who did
different
it?
segments within Black America,
How did the
including
law
the
in this
poor.
country get changed? And it started with
concur with
Thurgood
that.
Marshall.
It
And
started
where
with the
was
law,
Thurgood
exactly.
Marshall? He came up poor, but he made sure that he became a lawyer. He made sure that he became Solicitor General. He made sure that he got on the Supreme Court. And in 1954, with Brown versus Board of Education, that changed and gave black people, people of color, the ability to use the law as a weapon to make sure that their civil rights were protected.
And that worked
Okay.
100
Let me step in.
100%
Let me
that
step
did.
in, Lenny. I'm feeling all three of you right now. So, are we saying that every good thing and every tragic thing has to be dealt with on an individual basis, and we have to assume responsibility for the terrible as well as the good things that happen to us? Because, and I hate to use this example, but I'm going to use it. When you look at a person like an Oprah Winfrey, and you know, I'm just going to use her for the poster child today. There's so many black women in similar situations who have been molested as children, who have come from a
billionaire,
poverty-stricken
right? Okay.
background, who had all odds against them, and they flourish. So I'm feeling you, Lenny, because I'm through with the excuses. If I hear another excuse from an African American in this country, I'm like, look, dude, excuses don't pay the rent. Bootstraps, and even if you don't have any, get some. Talk to me, Stacy.
my grandmother, my granny, has a saying that they always keep a fly in a buttermilk. And there's always going to be an Oprah Winfrey to prove that this does work. But like you said, there are so many others that it doesn't work for. And we should use her in the manner in which we do, but we cannot ignore how it's so very easy to become disempowered and satisfied with absolutely nothing. How does that happen? And that's where we have to begin to concentrate our efforts. I don't take excuses from my students at any turn.
Yes.
I don't believe in that. but I also understand the circumstances in which they come from, which is probably why I don't take these excuses, but I do understand. So we have to understand, and there has to be an ethic of love in that understanding.
Ethic of love, ethic of care.
Right.
Yes.
And I think that is where we're missing the boat, because when we come at them and say, hey, you just got to do this, or this isn't right, but we don't say it in love.
Yeah, that's the difference.
That is the difference, but it goes back to this self-loathing, right? We have to begin to deal with how we feel about self. And that self-loathing is not just on the middle or the lower class level. That reaches every level of the stratas in the black community.
Okay, last poets. If we look at what the last poets said in one of their poems, they have this statement: when the revolution comes, are not the four of us the revolution? Are we not the chosen ones to get up and make something happen? When I listen to Lenny McCallister on the radio and on television, I'm impressed. When I see the great works that you do in terms of being a political activist, being someone involved in teachers union, being an amazing educator, I'm impressed. I know that you're doing great work. When I see this young man right here, I start smiling every time I see him on TV, because I'm like, uh-oh, he's gonna win again. And it's that charisma that I'm really attracted to, because that's something that is enthusiastic. What does enthusiasm mean? It comes from the root, in theos, which means God within. I see that in all three of you. So are we to sit here and say, and do nothing, or what do we do to spring things into action?
Well, you brought up something. You asked the question, is it on the individual or is it on the
There
collective?
we go. There we go.
But the real question is, and thus the answer is, it's up to the individual to make it a collective issue. That's what it boils down to. It's up to each individual to make it the collective. And that, Sam, is why we were able to get through civil rights, because the middle class did their stuff with the law, which they needed to do in order to challenge it on the constitutionality of what was going on. But if those poor folks didn't say, I'd rather walk to work than take that bus, and I can't afford to do that, because we hear a lot of times, well, I don't have the time, the money, my kids. You know what? Those poor folks could not afford to not take the bus. They could not afford to carpool all the time. But they did it because it made a difference. Everybody knew their lane. They stayed in their lane. They worked with each other, supported each other, and moved forward. They made sure that each individual made it their responsibility to make it a collective issue. That's what we have to go back to today, particularly within this Generation X, and make it rise up. Because, like you said, Stacy, every revolution in America, and dare I say around the world, comes up with the energy of the young, not the energy of the old. The old, the wise, they're the ones that are the elders that can point us in the right direction, give us the historical perspective, but it's the young with their zeal and their hope for the future that advances us.
Let's take a phone call. You're watching Off 63rd here on WYCC PBS Channel 20. Let's take a phone call. Caller, are you there? What's your comment?
Yes. Good evening. How y'all guys?
Hi, Steve.
Great. And Sam, Mr. Evans, you just said it right on target. That's what poor is. A person who cannot have money to get to work, they can't borrow money to get some money. That's somebody who's poor. But the main comment I want to say to you, Gerard, it's so wonderful to see you again. I miss you so much. I didn't know where you went. But now I will let my mom know you're there every Thursday at 6:30. I'm going to be looking at you. You always have some wonderful comments.
Hey, Steve.
Now, the question that I really wanted to ask was Mr. Adams. And Mr. Adams, listen, I think that you and your father have did so many wonderful things in the black community. See, I go back to the day when you and, your father and Mr. Eugene Pincham, the juggler, as they used to call him. If I ever in my life ever needed an attorney, I wouldn't hesitate to get you or your father to represent me, and hopefully I don't have to come, but I would go for you. So this is no disrespect to you, Mr. Evans. The question that I wanted to ask you, y'all did such a wonderful job with the governor. I understand that case. Was he guilty, Father, in my heart? No. But again, he was guilty on that one charge. Now, he needed some help this time. I just wonder, because I remember you were so devoted. You know, I almost saw you in tears. Why y'all just couldn't come back one more time? Just one more time.
Wow, Steve.
Yeah.
Steve, man,
Yeah.
that's an interesting. Steve, I got to let you go. Thank you so much for calling off 63rd, and thanks for the compliment.